It had been 3 years since Scott was sentenced to life in prison. Eligible for parole in 21 years, he had long since resigned himself to his fate. Sitting in his cell, nursing a fresh bruise from a rough encounter with the guards, he hardly expected visitors. With no family left, who would come to see him? But when the guard informed him he had a visitor, Scott was intrigued. He was led to the visitation area, and as he picked up the phone, he found himself staring at a well-dressed woman he had never seen before. "Hello, Scott. We have a lot to discuss," she said, with a confident smile. Scott narrowed his eyes. "I don't know you. Why are you here?" "My name is Cleo Barnes. I work for the CIA." She leaned forward slightly. "Let's cut to the chase. You can stay here, eating bad food and getting roughed up by guards, or you can come work for us." Scott hesitated, suspicious. "Work for you doing what exactly?" "You have a particular set of skills, eliminating people and making it look like an accident. We can put those skills to better use. You'll receive extensive training, and in return, you'll work for us in the field. What do you say?" Scott considered his options: a life of beatings and prison food, or a second chance with purpose. He smirked. "When do I start?" For 2 grueling years, Scott underwent some of the most intense training imaginable. The CIA honed his combat skills, taught him advanced marksmanship, and immersed him in psychological manipulation. He learned to operate undetected, blending into crowds, assuming new identities, and crafting elaborate misdirections. His ability to stage accidents became even more refined, drowning victims without water in their lungs, making poisonings look like allergic reactions, and orchestrating natural deaths through careful planning. Beyond the physical and tactical training, Scott endured rigorous mental conditioning. He had to sever emotional ties, embrace cold efficiency, and suppress any hesitation that might compromise a mission. He was no longer the betrayed husband. He was now an operative, a ghost who could move through the world unseen. His first few missions tested his newfound skills, eliminating low-level targets, tying up loose ends for the agency. But then came his biggest assignment yet, one that would take him to the UK. The target was Mike, a businessman who on paper was merely a silent partner in a small coffee shop. In reality, Mike was one of the most elusive arms dealers in Europe, funneling illegal weapons into conflict zones and funding covert militias. The CIA had been tracking him for years, but he had always managed to slip away, his clean-cut persona shielding him from suspicion. Mike had a reputation for being ruthless, yet calculated. He never got his own hands dirty, always working through intermediaries. His influence stretched far beyond what Scott initially assumed, and that made the mission all the more dangerous. What Scott didn't know was that the coffee shop Mike had invested in belonged to Jill, his ex-wife. She had moved to London for a fresh start, unaware that her past was about to collide with her present. For weeks, Scott surveilled Mike, carefully constructing the perfect plan. Every Tuesday, Mike visited the coffee shop. Scott positioned himself on a rooftop across from the shop, rifle in hand, waiting for the right moment. As Mike exited the shop and walked down the sidewalk, Scott took aim. A single shot struck the wheel of a passing car, sending it out of control. The car swerved violently, slamming into Mike. By the time the chaos settled, Mike was gone. Inside the shop, Jill heard the crash and ran outside, only to see Mike lifeless on the pavement. Her heart pounded as she scanned the area, and then she saw him, a man walking away with a large bag slung over his shoulder. The face was unmistakable. "Scott?" she gasped, disbelief and horror washing over her. Without thinking, she ran after him, calling his name. Scott didn't hear her. Focused on leaving undetected, he kept walking. Jill, in her desperation, didn't notice the speeding car as she darted into the street. The impact was brutal. Jill hit the ground hard, blood pooling around her. The commotion finally caught Scott's attention, and he turned to see his ex-wife lying on the pavement, unconscious and broken. For a moment, concern flashed in his eyes. But then, memories of betrayal flooded his mind, the way she had shattered their marriage. He took a deep breath and turned away as first responders arrived. Walking away, he muttered to himself, "I thought I cursed her, but maybe she's just careless." Jill survived the accident, but was left paralyzed from the waist down. Despite her injuries, she continued running her coffee shop, though the loneliness Scott had predicted slowly crept into her life. Scott, on the other hand, continued his work with the CIA until an assignment in South America went terribly wrong. Caught in an ambush, he was gunned down, his career ending in a hail of bullets. Jill, however, lived on. She ran her shop until she passed away at the age of 69, alone, just as Scott had once foretold.